How long does a facelift actually last? I get asked this at nearly every consultation, and for most of my career, the honest answer was, we don't really know. We had opinions, we had marketing. What we didn't have was long-term data. That changed this year. A study came out analyzing 30 years of deep plane facelifts, and it finally puts real numbers on this question. And one of those numbers surprised me. It might change how you think about the timing of your surgery. So let's go through it together carefully. If you search the same question, you'll find the same answer everywhere. Deep plane facelift, 10 to 15 years. SMAS facelift, 5 to 10. It's repeated so often it kind of sounds like a settled science. But the uncomfortable truth is that those numbers are just kind of conventional wisdom and tradition. Surgeons repeating what their mentors said and websites repeating each other. It's kind of like a, groupthink here. Measuring facelift longevity is genuinely hard to do, and it's very subjective. What does lasting even mean? The face never really stops aging. The day after your facelift, gravity goes back to work. So a facelift doesn't freeze you in time. It's not like a cryogenic freezing chamber, but it moves your starting line back a little bit. The real question is how long you remain meaningfully ahead of where you would have been. Now the data. Researchers in Beverly Hills looked back at 30 years of deep plane facelifts and specifically studied the patients who eventually came back for a revision. 93 revision facelifts, and they asked a simple, elegant question. How long did people wait? The answer, on average, 10.9 years between the first facelift and the revision. Some patients went nearly 30 years, and satisfaction was remarkably high. About 95% of patients were documented as satisfied within the first year, and most stayed satisfied for over a decade. So when someone tells you a well-executed deep plane facelift lasts about a decade or more, that's no longer just a talking point. There's now published data to support it. Of course, it's dependent on the surgeons. But here's the part that made me sort of sit up and my ears perk up. The researchers split patients by age. Patients who had their first facelift at 53 or younger, their results lasted an average of 12.4 years. Patients older than 53, about 9.3 years. Read that again. The younger patients got 3 more years out of the same operation. That sort of contradicts something that patients tell me at their consultation. I want to wait as long as possible, so I only have to do this once. I understand the logic behind that, but biologically it might be backwards. And as a surgeon, this matches what I see in the operating room and post-operatively, and I sort of want to explain why. Think about what a facelift actually asks of your tissue. In a deep plane lift, I release the retaining ligaments of the face and reposition the deeper layer, the SMAS, along with the skin as a composite block of tissue, and then that gets repositioned and it has to heal and sort of anchor itself down and hold itself against gravity for years, or a decade in this case. What determines whether it holds though? There's 2 things, and it's the work that I do and your tissue. My part is craftsmanship. Releasing the ligaments, for example. I do it so completely, so the lift isn't really fighting tethered anatomy and like ligaments that hold your SMAS down to your bone. I set the vector very thoughtfully. I fix that deep layer to stable structures so that the skin carries no tension whatsoever. It also makes the scar a lot better, because skin is the weakest organ in the body. Any facelift that relies on skin tension is just borrowing time it can't repay, and it pays it back as widened scars and early relapse. Your part is biology. Collagen, elastin, ligamentous integrity, bone structure. See, a 48-year-old SMAS is simply a better construction material than a 68-year-old's. Same architect, same blueprint, but stronger lumber. The house stands longer. That's likely a big part of what this study had captured. Now, because I promised you science and not marketing, let me tell you what this study does not prove. It measured time to revision, which is not the same thing as time that the result lasted, whatever lasted means. Some people live happily with fading results and never come back. Others are perfectionists at year 8. This study evaluates one practice's patients with excellent surgeons, so the results elsewhere could very well differ and probably would. And no study eliminates selection bias entirely. But even with those caveats, this is the best longitudinal look at facelift durability I've reviewed, and it broadly validates the 10+ year figure for a properly performed facelift in the right patient. So, there's 3 takeaways here. First, if you're weighing the investment, amortize it. A result measured in decades changes the math against a decade of fillers and energy devices that never quite gets you to where you want to be. Second of all, timing. I'm not telling anybody to rush into surgery, and I decline patients who aren't ready, either medically or psychologically. But if you're in your late 40s or 50s with real structural dissent, waiting another 10 years may not buy you a better outcome. The data, in fact, suggests that it may cost you one. Third, and most importantly, the operation on paper is not the operation you receive. The study followed meticulous deep plane surgery. Longevity lives in the details. The ligament release, the fixation, the tension kept off the skin, and in your compliance afterwards. Ask your surgeon not just what technique they use, but to show you how they actually do it. I find this genuinely encouraging. For decades, we've asked patients to make a 5-figure decision with folklore and conventional wisdom and mother's myths for data. Now we have 30 years of follow-up saying that when this operation is done well, it holds, often for 10 years or more. There are important limitations, of course, but if you'd like, I'll go deeper in a future video on exactly what happens inside the face at year 5 and year 10 after a deep plane facelift. Tell me in the comments what you want to learn more about, and thank you for your time. I'll see you in the next one.